Okay, so this is topic number 2, which is just called chemistry. The awesomest science. So yes, I get to blow things up, you don't. You do, however, get to set things on fire during the year, so that's a big plus. I will set things on fire, I will blow things up, I will make toxic chemicals. These are all parts of the demos. You will not do any of these. You will not make bombs. You will not make toxic chemicals. You will not hurt yourself. You will follow these safety instructions. Got it? I have been doing chemistry for close to 20 years now. I know chemistry. I know what works, what doesn't work, what causes accidents, what doesn't cause accidents. You do not. Despite what you may have read in the internet, you do not. So let's talk about chemistry. What is chemistry? Chemistry is the study of turning one type of stuff into another. Okay, and we call this stuff various names. Now, we are going to start with the chemical names that you will need to know. So let's start with, what is another word for stuff? Another word for stuff is matter and substance. Everything we will be studying this year is a matter or substance. Substance is just a word for everything. And matter is anything that has mass and volume. In other words, anything that you can see or not see that has mass, takes up space is matter, and a substance is everything. Now, we divide substances into 2 parts, pure and impure. Pure substances are elements and compounds. Impure substances are mixtures. What does it mean to be pure? That means you have one substance. And impure is 2 or more substances. Now, let's talk about each type of substance one by one. Let's start with the element. An element is a material that is made of one type of matter and is made of one type of atom found on the periodic table and cannot be broken down. So what are some examples of an element? Well, you have oxygen, copper, nickel, vanadium, i.e., look on the periodic table. The way we will designate an element in this class, let's say this is my flask, is a bunch of circles. Notice that all of the circles are the same, and therefore we are calling that an element. What is a compound? A compound contains 2 or more types of elements. Notice the word two. So, if I had O2 or H2O, are those both compounds? The answer to that is no. Oxygen, O2, is not a compound because there's only one type of element. H2O, on the other hand, has two types of elements, and therefore it is a compound. Those two types of elements have to be chemically bonded together. It has a definite composition. Going back to the H2O thing, for every two hydrogens, I have one oxygen. And it can be broken down chemically. We call this chemical breaking down a reaction. Basically, it breaks down. It can either be broken down into its parts, or it can be reacted with something else, and a piece of one part and a piece of the other can go somewhere else. We'll talk about reactions later in the year. Now, elements and compounds are the same because they are both pure substances and they both are the same material throughout. They're different in that elements make up compounds, and elements cannot be broken down, but chemicals or compounds can be broken down chemically. Let's move on to the next topic, the impure compounds. Impure chemicals, which are the mixtures. The mixtures are two or more pure substances physically combined. Its composition can change. It can be physically separated. And it can retain properties of its components, also known as its pieces. So let's go back on that last one. What does that mean? Well, what that means is a mixture is made of two or more pure substances. A compound is two or more types of elements, and an element is one type of matter that is found on the periodic table. What does that mean? Well, if I combine two elements physically, I form a mixture. In that, I can separate the two chemicals apart, and the two chemicals retain their properties. So if I mix copper and nickel in a bucket, I can pull out the copper and it's still copper. I can pull out the nickel and it's still nickel. However, if I combine two elements together and they react to bond together chemically, I no longer have, for example, in water is not have the properties of hydrogen and oxygen. Hydrogen is explosive, oxygen allows us to breathe. However, I cannot explode water, and I cannot breathe water. Therefore, it's not the same as the individual elements. And mixture has the same properties. So, for example, if I have salt water, which is a mix of salt and water, and I boil off the water, I'm left with salt, which still tastes like salt and still reacts like salt, and water, which still acts like salt and reacts like salt. Now notice, how did I separate these two? Well, I boiled off the water. So boiling, which is going to come up soon, is physically changing something. That's going to become very important in the next part of this unit. Boiling is physically changing something. Now notice that if I have a mixture of salt and water, I can see through it, and it would be homogeneous. Homogeneous being the same throughout, more or less. Now, I can make more or less concentrated saltwater solutions, so it's still a mixture, but it's the same throughout. If you didn't hear the word I used, we call these solutions. Now let's say we go back, and again, I combine two elements that I can separate out. But if I was to take a sample of this, I would not get the same thing every time. We call this a heterogeneous mixture, as we cannot get the same, every time we pull a sample, we don't get the same result. So, to review, you need to know from this lecture, element, compound, and mixture. Now, if you would like more practice knowing what an element and a compound and a mixture is, you should go to pages 1 to 5 in your textbook and do problems 1 to 19. That will allow you to practice these ideas.